Mm. tsamaya re we can either go for the operation wa nwa le dipilisi tsa di-hormone tsa go suppressa di-hormone tsa radio. That's why monna wa TikTok a na le motho wa le di-hormone tsa go suppressa. Batho ba ntse ba tswela ya di-beard and all that stuff.
You might look at it as you're just living your true self, but the most important thing I think for me that made me confident, apart from the fact that my father was a bishop, was that we had a great relationship. And at first, obviously, it wasn't easy. But along the journey, then he was able to understand me and love me for who I am. So I trust that with all of us attending this session today, we're going to walk away with something that's going to help our cousins, that's going to help our friends, that's going to help our colleagues and everyone that, identify as a queer person, and you're able to
Oh my gosh.
to express with them and call them the way that they prefer to be addressed, right? Another question that I have, I'm going to face this to you, Rochelle. It says, how do you educate yourself and others on LGBTQIA issues and best practices in the workplace?
So I think for me, it's important that when someone joins the organization, there's really immediately a sense of visibility. And what I've suggested to most organizations is that even in the induction process, that snippet, that small containment of information that Anzia had presented to us, there's so much delving more into how we can unpack those things. And so if someone comes to the organization, we immediately say, this is part of our diversity chain. Every employee that joins this organization has to, for instance, undergo this. And maybe even be, examined on the level of knowledge that they've acquired, because that already sets the standard for how we operate within the organization. I think also, that continuous visibility around issues. Do we have, educational materials that speak to, for instance, the acronym? Do we have educational materials to what an ally looks like? Do we have materials that speak to what pronouns are? Is the organization visibly also sharing that information with employees to create that constant sense of diversity. So I work in government in the Premier's office, and in essence, my job is government oversight of all 13 government departments. And so, you know, before I could even get buy-in from these individuals to create accesses to programs, services for LGBTI individuals, I had to do exactly what Anthea had done. You know, this training that is intensive to get them on board, and it's so beautiful for me to see when the penny drops. When the penny drops, and then I'm invited by all government departments to say, come, this is what diversity looks like, you know. There's a hunger to say, okay, from people in the organization to say, like, actually, I am now such a great ally. I'm going to educate everybody in my family. I'm going to educate my stakeholders. I'm going to educate my colleagues, because I'm now armed with this information. So I think education is imperative. We don't get this information in South Africa, in our schooling system, at universities. And so we are working on that as a government on policy levels in many ways. But also the workplace is then also a great opportunity to attain inclusivity for LGBTI persons.
Thank you so much. I have a comment that's posted on our online session, and Anthony, I'm going to ask you to speak to this because in your talk you had this part in your speech. So it says, I love that the LGBTQI space is opening in Eskom, and we need to raise the flag higher in Eskom. We are not just amochomi, we need to be cemented in the corporate world with our truth and our identity. So the feeling of being called chosen.
I am people's trophy, I am people's Tsala, I am people's best friend, I am, but when I become that for you, I also expect you to stand in my corner.
Yay!
You say, Tsala, can you please help me choose my outfit, for example? It's cute. But when I say, Tsala, can you please help me deal with workplace discrimination? Are you there?
Yeah.
So,
Power.
in the same way that it took ages for women to be taken seriously at a C-suite level in corporate, for us to walk with you in that journey needs you to identify that we are there, that we are more than the office joke or the office clown, that we are more than the presentation that we come to the office in, that we have lives and families just like you. And when the policies start to change because you have said something, when the environment changes because you stand up, that's when I can be Tsala, that's when I can be chosen. But until such time, if I can't come to work because I'm going to face discrimination here, I will not show up. I remember just briefly, as I was engaging Eskom for the first time, one of the stories that was shared was about use of the gym area and how that could potentially not be safe. And I wondered then, how much work do we do to protect women, for example, in a gym area? And how much harder would it have been to add a few words to that policy to protect everyone? Why, when we make strides, when we progress, we prioritize one group of people and say, we'll come to the others later. At least if it's now fancy, then we can move with queer people or gay people later. They are part of this EWAP program. But we could also just make an environment that's inclusive once, and then nobody's going to struggle after because we would have been proactively inclusive.
Can I add to that as well? I mean, there's also this misconception that when you are queer or you form part of the rainbow family, that the person that is gay is the flamboyant, over-the-top individual that is effeminate, right? we need to move away from that as well. They are masculine gay men. Because, and unless you speak to them, you'll never know that they are in same gendered relationships. In the same way, we expect lesbians to be more masculine or butch presenting, so to speak. Me, I love women. Maybe this is why I'm single, because nobody assumes that you can be a lesbian and look like this. Tell your friends. It's so easy to package the gay individual or create them as a caricature of something that's supposed to be the representation of LGBTI people. When people are so diverse when it comes to the orientation, their gender identity and expression and their sex characteristics. So nobody in itself is one particular way of being. There's so much diversity even in those letters.
Thank you so much for that. Can we please put our hands? I just want to encourage our colleagues to please post on the chat platform, be it question, be it comments, because we also want to hear from you from the other side. And one more question for Anzio. How do you foster a culture of belonging and empowerment for LGBTQIA+ employees in your team or organization that we could potentially use for this?
So I find myself talking a lot. And I don't talk about LGBTQIA+ identities, I talk about marginalized groups. Because we are marginalized in many ways along many intersects of our identities. But the problem is your marginalization and my marginalization and Trent's marginalization and Rocher's marginalization don't look the same. That intersectional identity needs to be able to show up at work, and in order for it to show up, we have to talk about what that intersectionality is. So there is something to be said about the fact that I often present as male and often come and speak at women empowerment events. There's something to be said about the fact that as a queer person, I don't always present as queer. And so it becomes difficult to read me, but then I'm able to occupy space in a particular way. So what does it mean that I show up as a man and I speak on queer issues and I get read as a man, and so I'm afforded privilege in this country? When we start to talk about the issues of power and privilege, we start to have different conversations that are inclusive. When we talk about power, we talk about the gender imbalance. When we talk about power, we talk about disability. When we talk about power, we talk about race, class, sex, all of the other categories that there are, instead of zoning in on one particular individual that maybe fits this category, and then we do a little bit of work here, and so what am I if it works so? What we need to do is to talk about power that has not been afforded to certain individuals in marginalized groups, and then we can have honest and frank conversations when we get to the boardroom and the policy level. So mine is to talk, but not everybody is able to talk because of where they're standing. And I think that's important to
acknowledge. Rocher, there's a question that's posted online, and it says, how do you approach conversations with people who might not understand or be accepted of your sexual orientation?
You know, working in government has been very interesting for me because the assumption is that in all 13 departments and the Office of the Premier, there are no gays. But let me tell you, I walk and my gay dog goes like ding, 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 all the time. And so for me, when someone doesn't understand, I always say I'm one of the most patient teachers that you could possibly get. You know, we have this culture on Twitter says like cancel culture. When you say something wrong, we cancel you. And so we have now adopted what we call a culture of calling in. Instead of just calling you out of all of the things that you've done wrong, we are going to call you in and say, but listen, do you understand, firstly, why do you have this prejudice? Secondly, do you understand this framing of these individuals, no, because you've never had the education. Number three, can I tell you? So I always say I have loads of patience for homophobes and transphobes, right? They will become my best friends at the end of it. And I think that's the way to handle these things. We are so quick to also dismiss the fact that people don't have knowledge, that they don't have access to knowledge, etc. But in the meantime, we also have to ensure that there's a measure of patience in relaying this information until they become allies. So I think definitely with a lot of talking to, not talking at, understanding the positionality from where people are moving from in their knowledge base, and further than that, you know, ensuring that this is a consistent conversation and not just a once-off.
The next question that I have online says, what role has your cultural and ethnic background played in shaping your experience? And I'm going to hand it over to Enzio.
As maybe a parent, I often get classified as colored. I grew up in a Xhosa home, and that is very confusing to people. At times when I'm having to navigate spaces around my identity and my culture, I'm having to think about the diversity of my own identity and culture first. But I think that what has become really useful in my journey is to be able to identify for myself an accurate history. History is told by the victim. And unfortunately, many of us sitting in this room are not the victim. So our identities have been systematically erased. Did we know the queens of Africa? Did we know the greatness of their empires? Even here in South Africa, Queen Mojaji is, I think, the 14th or 15th dynasty now. And there are things there that we can learn. Did you know that Mojaji can take a wife? Yes. Why did I not learn that in school? It would have made my life so much easier. So when I start to look at culture, when I start to take apart the things that I've been told as true, when I start to do that work of unpacking, I start to learn many things. What is interesting to me is that the colonial period coincides with new religion in many ways. I don't talk about religion in these spaces. But if you look just interestingly at the advent of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Buddhism, they are very new religions. So what happened before them? Where were my people before them? Why is it that I can see a depiction of same-sex relationships on rock art of the Khoi and the son of the people of this very land, but you won't talk to me about having existed here before? For me, I'm African. So I think in sum, when we talk about culture, we have to interrogate which culture we are.
This is quite an interesting conversation. I have tackled 2 questions from online. I'm going to tackle 2 questions inside the auditorium if anyone has a question, and then we'll open. So, are there any questions, my team? Please be ready with microphones just in case we have hands up. There's a hand right over there.
We are ready. Nanya kukucha question mara kafika question kini ko kuyemelea. Good.
First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Sipo. I'm from the University of the Witwatersrand. So I work at the Gender Equity Office as an intern. And I'm also a safe zones facilitator. So it means I have, at the safe zones, I have been trained by Tishwright. So it means most of the things that I'm talking about, I've been trained under, and I'm able to train other people. think
Your boss.
I think NGO, I think I would like to bridge the essence of the word queer. I think the word queer, people need to be very sensitive on how they use the word queer. Because in the 16th century, I'm talking about queer history, in the 16th century, then the word queer was used to segregate people from the LGBTQIA, right? So, but as queer people, we have reclaimed the name as queer. For example, I'm a black man, so I can say nigga, right? And we have reclaimed the word nigga. And so I can call Melita, who is my colleague, nigga, because we've reclaimed the name back. But now from someone who identifies or who's straight and they use the word queer can have adverse effects on me if they don't mean it the correct way, right? So I think we have to be quite sensitive on how we use the word queer, right? And yeah, I think that was like my main point. Also, I think this is, I would like to comment, and I hope the people, the executive from ESCOM can hear me, that if women can't get bathrooms, how can queer people get bathrooms? How can non-binary people get bathrooms where they feel comfortable in, so that they can have a conducive work environment? This is the call to them as the management or as the leaders of ESCOM to why women don't have bathrooms in 2023. In the 21st century, we're still complaining about the simple thing as a bathroom, someone to go pee or someone to take number 2 there. We're not complaining about such issues when we have to be fighting gender-based violence, or we have to fight genocide. So there's a lot of issues that we have to fight about, but I think bathrooms are not one, and this needs to be rectified as soon as possible. Thank you.
We are talking about mostly that are going to be inclusive for queer individuals, but as for women's bathroom, we definitely have. I'm going to take the conversation.
We do have a crossing, doesn't have a
Substation.
Oh, substation.
What kind of
Cái mốc logo không?
Hi everyone. My name is Perseverance Maramini. I'm from Matimba Power Station. I just have a question in general, regarding coming out. I'm hoping you guys will have people to answer me, because every time when a friend of mine says they are coming out and they're disclosing their sexuality, for me, it never makes sense, because since all I can relate to coming out, because I've never really seen the need to explain my sexuality to anybody to say, this is what I'm laying down with, and what I'm not. But now, when it comes to somebody who is, their sexuality is quite different to mine, when they say they're coming out, to me, I feel like it's nobody's business. So what is the significance of you coming out as an individual? And you coming out because you feel like you owe somebody an explanation of who you lay down with, or you think that's going to make you more relatable? What is the main reason why you feel the need to come out?
So we had a question, and Trent is going to respond to the question.
I just wanted to clarify, when you use the term coming out, like in what reference are you referring to it? Are you referring to like gay, lesbian?
Yes, yes.
Because basically, yes, you don't have to announce you're gay, you don't have to announce you're lesbian, but transgender is a whole different thing.
Okay.
Because you're changing your whole sexuality, and you're going from either a man to a woman, or a woman to a man. So yes, that does need to be spoken about in order to be understood, so that people like you can support your friends and help them, you know, because with that kind of coming out comes lots of, you know, discrimination and harassment, and it's, so for that coming out,
Okay.
I would say yes, it does need to be.
Okay. No, it is understandable in that regard. The only thing now regarding everybody else is that when you have to sit your parents down and say, this is my sexuality. It's quite different. When I'm a woman, I need to sit my parents down and say, I'm getting married, regardless of who I'm getting married to. But in your case, with everybody else who has to say, this is my sexuality first before you can even.
So I also think like coming out is so it's outdated as a concept, but why it's maybe important for individuals in the workplace is to also create a sense of equity and access, you know? Then we're speaking about things like maternity and paternity leave. You may have something like spousal leave. When people are adopting same-sex couples or same-gender couples, if they're adopting, do we make this provision for that transition to say, okay, we have a whole new child here that needs care in terms of parental rights? When we look at things like medical aids, for instance, right, we would say, okay, this is the medical aid that belongs to ESCOM, this is what is available to you. But like say, for instance, someone that is a transgender individual